Lisbon is a city of 7 hills and 1,000 secrets, where the golden light of the Tagus River reflects off white limestone and blue azulejos, masking a history carved in tragedy and greed. The air here smells of salt, roasting coffee, and a faint, earthy scent of ancient dust rising from the cracks in the pavement. For centuries, the people of Lisbon have walked over the remains of a city that was swallowed by the earth in 1755, forgetting that beneath the elegant grid of the Baixa district, something far more valuable than stone remained buried. Isabel, a woman whose name had been stripped from the royal registries decades ago, stood at the edge of the Alfama district. Looking down at the city, she was about to set on fire with the truth. She was a denied heiress, the daughter of a family that had been silenced by the regime, and she held a map to an 18th century diamond legacy that was never meant to be found. Isabel had spent 30 years in the shadows, living in a small apartment in Porto, watching the world move on while her family's name was dragged to the mud of history. Her grandfather had been a jeweler to the court, a man who possessed the truth about the Braganza diamonds, a collection of raw stones brought from the mines of Brazil that disappeared during the chaos of the Great Earthquake. Officially, the diamonds were lost to the sea when the tsunami hit the Praça do Comércio. But Isabel's family knew the financial topic was far more sinister. The diamonds hadn't been lost. They had been sequestrated by a cabal of noblemen who used the disaster to reset the kingdom's ledger. The urgency of Isabel's return to Lisbon was triggered by a single letter, a deathbed confession from a former captain of the Pied, the secret police of the old dictatorship. The letter contained a set of coordinates and a warning. The stones are not in a vault. They are the foundation. Isabel realized that the reconstruction of Lisbon after 1755, led by the Marquis of Pombal, wasn't just an architectural marvel. It was a massive, city-wide shell game. The wealth of the empire had been literally built into the masonry of the new city to keep it out of the hands of the creditors. This was the exclusivity of the Lisbon fortune, a treasure that everyone walked over every single day, but no one could see. If you are drawn to the mysteries of the old world and the hidden wealth of fallen empires, you must be part of the Novel Chronicles community. We are embarking on a 100,000 character investigation into the heart of Portugal's greatest secret. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you don't miss Block 2, where Isabel enters the forbidden tunnels beneath the Baixa. Your support allows us to dig deeper into the stories that time tried to bury. Isabel walked down the steep, narrow streets of Alfama, her heels clicking against the basalt cobblestones. She felt the weight of the iron key in her pocket, a key that had been passed down through 3 generations of disinherited women. She reached the Rua de Prata, where the famous Roman galleries are hidden beneath the street. Every year, for just a few days, the public is allowed to enter these flooded tunnels. But Isabel wasn't there for the Roman history. She was there for the 18th century surprise that was hidden behind a false wall in the drainage system. The financial topic of the Braganza diamonds was the backbone of a modern-day banking empire. The stones had been used as collateral for ghost loans that funded the industrialization of Portugal in the 20th century. If Isabel could prove the stones still existed and belonged to her bloodline, the resolution would be the total collapse of one of the largest financial institutions in southern Europe. This wasn't just a hunt for jewelry. It was an audit of the city's soul. As she approached the entrance to the tunnels, she noticed a black car parked near the fountain. 2 men in dark suits, their faces obscured by the shadows of the Chiado buildings, were watching her. The antagonists had arrived. They were the keepers of the foundation, the descendants of a nobleman who had stolen the legacy in 1755. They knew that if the denied heiress found the stones, their exclusivity would evaporate. The suspense was a cold wind blowing off the river, a reminder that in Lisbon, the dead don't stay buried for long. Isabel, a voice called out from the darkness. It was Chiado, a young historian she had contacted in secret. He looked pale, his eyes darting toward the black car. You shouldn't have come here during the day. They've been monitoring the archives. They know about the 1755 ledger. The ledger is just a story, Chiado, Isabel replied, her voice steady. The key is reality. They can burn the books, but they can't burn the stones. The truth is exclusively here, beneath our feet, and I'm the only one who can unlock it. The connection between the royal betrayal of the 18th century and the corporate greed of 2025 was a bridge made of diamonds and blood. Isabel and Chiado descended into the dark, damp air of the subterranean galleries. The sound of dripping water echoed like a ticking clock. The urgency of the situation was absolute. They had less than an hour before the galleries were closed and the guards returned. To see what Isabel finds behind the false wall of the Rua de Prata and to witness the first glimpse of the stolen Braganza diamonds, stay with us for Block 2 of this Lisbon Chronicle. Subscribe to Novel Chronicles and leave a comment. Do you think a family legacy should be returned even if it ruins a nation's economy? The truth is coming to the surface. Isabel stopped in front of a stone slab marked with the crest of the Marquis of Pombal. She reached for the key. The history of Lisbon was about to be rewritten. Lisbon is a city built on top of its own ghost, a labyrinth of limestone and fado where the golden light of the Tagus River masks a foundation of ancient greed. The air in the Baixa district smells of roasted chestnuts and salt, but if you breathe deeply enough, you can still catch the faint, metallic scent of the dust that settled over the ruins in 1755. Isabel stood in the center of the Praça do Comércio, her eyes tracing the symmetry of the Pombaline architecture to the world. She was a ghost, a woman whose noble lineage had been systematically erased by the secret police during the long years of the dictatorship. But Isabel was not here for an apology. She was here for an audit. She was a denied heiress, and she held the only map to an 18th century diamond legacy that was never meant to be uncovered. For decades, the official history books claimed that the Braganza diamonds, a staggering collection of raw stones brought from the deep mines of colonial Brazil, had been swallowed by the sea when the tsunami hit the royal palace. But Isabel's family knew the truth. The disaster of 1755 had provided the perfect cover for a massive financial topic that involved the systematic theft of the crown's liquid assets by a cabal of high-ranking ministers. The diamonds hadn't been lost. They had been used as secret collateral to rebuild the city, effectively turning the very walls of Lisbon into a massive, unrecorded bank vault. This was the exclusivity of the Lisbon secret. The entire city was a monument to a stolen fortune. Isabel felt the weight of the iron key in her pocket, its surface cold and pitted with age. It had been passed down from her grandmother, a woman who had died in exile, whispering about the foundation stones of the Rua de Prata. The urgency of Isabel's mission was palpable. A major international banking merger was set to take place in 3 days, an event that would consolidate the stolen diamond assets into a digital format, making them untraceable forever. She had 72 hours to prove that the financial topic of the nation's recovery was built on a crime before her family's legacy vanished into the ether of global finance. If you are captivated by the secrets of the old world and the hidden wealth that lies beneath the streets of Europe's most beautiful cities, you must be part of the Novel Chronicles community. We are crafting a massive 80,000 character narrative that dives into the heart of Lisbon's darkest history. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell to follow every step of this investigation. Your subscription is a key that helps us unlock these stories for the world. Isabel met Chiado in the shadows of the Sé Cathedral. He was a young archivist who had spent years tracking the ghost ledgers of the Marquis of Pombal. He looked nervous, his eyes darting toward the black sedans parked along the curb. "They know you're in the city, Isabel," he whispered, handing her a weathered blueprint of the subterranean Roman galleries. The keepers of the foundation, the descendants of the original cabal, have been monitoring the archives for any mention of the 1755 sequestrations. They won't let you reach the vault. The truth isn't in the archives, Chiado. It's in the stone, Isabel replied, her voice firm. The connection between the royal betrayal of the 18th century and the corporate corruption of 2025 was a bridge made of blood and diamonds. They descended into the damp, lightless tunnels beneath the Baixa, the sound of dripping water echoing like the ticking of a doomsday clock. The exclusivity of the location was terrifying. These were tunnels that hadn't been officially opened in over a century, a forgotten artery of the city where the denied fortune was whispered to be guarded by the weight of Lisbon itself. As they moved deeper into the darkness, Isabel's flashlight caught the glint of something embedded in the mortar of a reinforced archway. It wasn't a diamond, but a seal, the private mark of her ancestor, the royal jeweler. The surprise was that the diamonds weren't just hidden in a box. They were integrated into the architecture. The financial topic was a literal structural support. If she removed the stones, she risked more than just a scandal. She risked the physical stability of the street above. The suspense was electric as they heard the heavy sound of a metal hatch opening somewhere behind them. The antagonist had followed them into the deep. These men represented the bank that was currently using the diamond legacy to guarantee their multi-billion-dollar merger. To them, Isabel was urgently that needed to be silenced. "We don't have much time," Chiado hissed, his flashlight shaking. "If they catch us here, we become just another part of the city's foundation." Isabel reached the end of the tunnel, where a massive stone slab was marked with a cryptic date, November 1st, 1755. This was a resolution she had been seeking her entire life. Using the iron key, she found a small indentation in the masonry. As she turned the key, a low, grinding sound filled the chamber. The wall didn't just open, it bled light. Behind the stone was a void filled with the raw, uncut fire of Braganza legacy, thousands of carats that had been hidden for nearly 300 years. To see if Isabel can escape the subterranean labyrinth with the proof of her family's stolen legacy, and to witness the moment the Lisbon banking world realizes the truth is finally out, stay tuned for the next block of this chronicle. Subscribe to Novel Chronicles and leave a comment. Would you risk destroying a city's history to claim your rightful fortune? The audit of the Seven Hills has only just begun. Isabel grabbed a handful of the rough stones, their edges sharp against her palm. She didn't feel joy. She felt a cold, hard clarity. This was a denied fortune that fueled a century of lies. "Take the photos, Chiado," she commanded. "The world needs to see the price of Lisbon's reconstruction." But as the first flash went off, a voice boomed from the darkness of the tunnel. "It's a beautiful hoard, isn't it, Isabel? It's a shame no one will ever know you found it." The Iron Dragon of Lisbon, the CEO of the Banco do Tejo, stepped into the light, a silenced pistol in his hand. The suspense was absolute. The connection between the earthquake and the modern boardroom was now a direct line of fire. The silence of the subterranean chamber was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic dripping of water and the shallow, frantic breathing of Chiado, the man standing before them. Enrique Tejo was the physical embodiment of the financial topic that had ruled Portugal for generations. His suit was impeccable, a sharp contrast to the grime and ancient dust of the Roman galleries. He didn't look like a common thief. He looked like a guardian. To Enrique, the truth about the Braganza diamonds was a matter of national security, a pillar that supported the very architecture of the Portuguese economy. If Isabel revealed that the diamonds were stolen collateral, his family's bank, and the multi-billion-dollar merger would dissolve into a puddle of litigation and scandal. "You don't understand the scale of what you're touching, Isabel," Enrique said, his voice as smooth as polished marble despite the weapon in his hand. "These stones didn't just rebuild the Baixa. They funded the railroads, the ports, and the very survival of this nation during the lean years. Your family was disinherited not out of malice, but out of necessity. You were the cost of stability." The exclusivity of his conviction was chilling. He truly believed that a century of lies was a fair price for the order he represented. He was the ultimate antagonist, a man who saw human lives as mere decimals in a grander ledger. Isabel stood her ground, the raw diamonds in her hand feeling like frozen fire. The connection between the 1755 disaster and this cold-blooded confrontation was absolute. "Necessity is a lie you tell yourself to sleep at night, Enrique," she spat back. "My grandmother died in a cold room in Paris because your grandfather decided her life was worth less than a foundation stone. This isn't about stability. It's about the denied fortune that you've been using to buy your way into the future." The suspense was a taut wire between them, vibrating with the echoes of a 300-year-old crime. If you are holding your breath to see if Isabel can outmaneuver the shadows of the Lisbon elite, you are part of a growing community of truth seekers. Subscribe to Novel Chronicles and hit the bell icon to ensure you don't miss the next chapter of this 80,000-character epic. Your engagement is the only thing that keeps the truth from being buried once again. Don't let the keepers of the foundation win this battle. Enrique gestured with a pistol toward the stone slab. "Hand over the key and the satchel. Isabel, we can arrange a quiet life for you, a life of luxury, far from here. But the diamonds stay. They are the exclusivity of the Banco do Tejo. Without them, the merger fails and thousands of families lose their savings. Do you really want to be the one who crashes the market? This was his final play. The financial topic weaponized. He would try and make her feel responsible for the very system that had crushed her. Chiado shifted slightly, his hand reaching for a heavy iron rod on the floor. But Isabel shook her head. She knew Enrique wouldn't hesitate to fire. But she also knew something Enrique didn't. She had spent years studying the surprise elements of Pombaline engineering. The Marquis of Pombal hadn't just built a city. He had built a trap. The vault they were standing in was part of the Gaiola Pombalina, the wooden cage structure designed to withstand earthquakes. But this specific chamber was a pressure valve. If the stones were moved without the correct sequence, the hydraulic balance of the flooded galleries would shift. You think you own this city because your name is on the buildings, Isabel said, her voice dropping to a whisper. But you don't even know how it works. She reached back and pulled a small, iron lever hidden behind the stone seal. The resolution was immediate. A low, guttural groan echoed through the tunnels. The water level in the Roman galleries began to rise with terrifying speed. This was the urgently that Enrique hadn't prepared for. The chamber was designed to flood to protect the treasure from intruders, an 18th century security system that was still operational. The joy that flashed in Isabel's eyes was a reflection of the rising water. The connection between her ancestors' craftsmanship and her own survival was now their only hope. The water will fill this chamber in 3 minutes. Enrique, she shouted over the sudden roar of the Tagus River rushing into the lower vents. You can shoot us and drown with the diamonds, or you can drop the gun and follow us to the secondary exit. The suspense reached a fever pitch as Enrique looked at the rising tide, his eyes darting between the fortune he guarded and the life he was about to lose. "You're insane!" Enrique yelled, the water now reaching his knees. The financial topic of his merger meant nothing in the face of the drowning river. He fired a shot, but the bullet ricocheted off the damp stone as Chiado tackled him into the rising surge. Isabel didn't wait. She grabbed the satchel of proof, the ledger and the select stones that proved the truth, and scrambled up a rusted ladder toward the Rua de Prata. The resolution of this underground war was coming to the surface. As Isabel climbed, she could hear the chaotic sound of the struggle below. The denied fortune was being reclaimed by the river, but the evidence was in her hand. She emerged through a manhole in a side alley near the Praca do Municipio, gasping for the salt-tinged Lisbon air. The city above was oblivious, the tourists still taking photos of the yellow trams, unaware that a financial empire had just been decapitated 40 feet beneath their feet. But the keepers of the foundation were not just in the tunnels. As Isabel reached the street, 3 more black sedans screeched to a halt at the end of the alley. The exclusivity of the chase had only moved from the dark into the light. The urgently was now erased through the 7 hills of Lisbon. She looked back at the manhole just as Tiago's hand reached out, pulling himself up, exhausted and soaked. "We have to go," he wheezed. "They have the whole district cordoned off." To see the high-speed chase through the narrow streets of the Alfama, and to find out if Isabel can reach the international press before the bank's cleanup crew finds her. Stay tuned for the next block. Subscribe to Novel Chronicles and leave a comment. Is the truth where the chaos it brings? The secrets of the 1755 earthquake are finally breathing. Isabel looked at the diamonds in her satchel. They didn't look like wealth anymore. They looked like justice. "To the say, Chiado," she commanded. "We lose them in the labyrinth." The tires of the black sedan screamed against the ancient basalt cobblestones of the Baixa, a modern sound of aggression that tore through the evening quiet of the city. Isabel and Chiado didn't look back. They ran with the desperation of those who carry a secret heavy enough to sink a nation. The air was turning colder as the sun dipped behind the 25 de Brill Bridge, casting long, skeletal shadows across the Praca do Municipio. The financial topic that had started as a whisper in a damp tunnel was now a loud, violent pursuit on the surface. Isabel clutched the satchel to her chest. The truth about the Braganza diamonds was a physical weight, a collection of stones that felt like ice against her ribs. They dived into the mouth of a narrow alleyway leading toward the Alfama, the only place where the centuries-old exclusivity of the city's geography could protect them. Here, the streets were too narrow for sedans, a labyrinth of stairs and hanging laundry that dated back to the Moorish occupation. The urgency of their situation was a drumbeat in their ears. Every corner they turned brought them closer to the Say Cathedral, but it also brought them closer to the perimeter the keepers of the foundation were surely establishing. Enrique Teju was not a man who allowed his exclusivity to be challenged without a fight. And even if he was still struggling in the flooded tunnels, his network was vast and ruthless. If you're following this heart-pounding race through the historic soul of Portugal and want to know if the denied fortune will finally be revealed to the world, you are part of the Novel Chronicles family. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell to witness the final resolution of this 80,000 character saga. We are uncovering the layers of conspiracy that has remained hidden since 1755. Leave a comment. Which city should we audit next? Your support keeps the truth alive. The tram. Chiado wheezed, pointing toward a flash of yellow at the top of a steep incline. The legendary tram 28 was rattling its way up toward the Miradoro Delaware Santa Luzia. It was a relic of the past, but in this moment, it was their only hope of breaking through the cordon. They scrambled up a flight of stone stairs, their lungs burning with the salty, humid air. Behind them, they heard the slamming of car doors and the shouting of men. The antagonists had abandoned their vehicles and were pursuing on foot, their heavy boots echoing against the walls of the Fadu houses. The connection between the 1755 earthquake and this modern chase was a persistence of power. The men chasing them were the grandchildren of the men who had rewritten the laws after the disaster to ensure their exclusivity. To them, the truth was a virus, and Isabel was a carrier. They leapt onto the moving wooden platform of the tram just as it crested the hill. The startled passengers looked on as two soaking wet, disheveled people collapsed onto the floor. Isabel looked out the back window and saw a man in a dark suit standing at the bottom of the stairs, speaking urgently into a radio. They had a window, but it was closing fast. The diamonds, we have to see if they're enough, Tiago whispered, his hand shaking as he peered into the satchel. The surprise was not just the quantity, but the quality. These weren't just stones. They were the brigons of fire, raw diamonds that carried the unique chemical signature of the Brazilian mines that had been exhausted over 200 years ago. They were scientifically impossible to replicate. They were the resolution to a century of economic doubt. If she could get these stones to the International Mineralogical Laboratory in the Chiado, the Banco do Teju's claim to exclusivity would be shattered by a single chemical analysis. The suspense heightened as the tram rumbled past the ancient stone walls of the Say. Suddenly, the tram screeched to a halt. A black SUV had blocked the tracks ahead. "Out! Now!" Isabel commanded. They jumped from the tram and disappeared into a dense crowd of tourists waiting outside a Fadu restaurant. The financial topic was now a game of hide-and-seek in a crowd. The joy of the escape was short-lived, however, as Isabel realized they were being pushed toward the cliffside overlooks. They reached the Miradoro das Portas do Sol. The city of Lisbon spread out below them like a map of glowing embers. The exclusivity of the view was breathtaking, but Isabel only saw the escape routes. "Tiago, the archives. The digital backup you made in the tunnel. Did it sync?" she asked. "Only partially," he replied, checking his phone. "The truth is still mostly in that bag." A figure emerged from the crowd, blocking their path to the stairs. It wasn't Enrique, but a woman Isabel recognized from the news. The bank's chief legal officer. She didn't have a gun. She had a tablet. "Isabel, stop," the woman said, her voice calm and bureaucratic. "We are authorized to offer you the full denied fortune. All of it. The bank will create a foundation in your name. You can have the life your family was robbed of. All we ask is that you hand over the ledger. We can't let the financial topic of the 1755 debt go public. It would destroy the national credit rating." This was the ultimate surprise. They weren't just trying to kill her anymore. They were trying to buy her. They were offering her the very joy she had been denied for 30 years. But Isabel looked at the woman, and then at the city below, built on the bones of the disinherited. The resolution she wanted wasn't wealth. It was the end of the exclusivity of the lie. "My family didn't want a foundation. Isabel said, her voice echoing over the balcony. They wanted the truth, and the truth belongs to Lisbon, not to your board directors. The woman's face hardened. Then you leave us no choice. The urgency of the bank's survival outweighs your sentiment. She signaled to the men closing in from the sides. The suspense was absolute. They were trapped against a railing, the drop to the streets of Alfama below sheer and unforgiving. The connection between her ancestors' leap into the unknown during the earthquake and her own position was a perfect, terrifying circle. "Hold on," Isabel whispered to Chiado. She didn't go for the stairs. She looked at the vintage funicular cable that ran just below the overlook, a service line used for maintenance. It was a desperate, mad resolution. She threw the satchel to Chiado and gripped the iron guide wire. We go down or we go to jail. To see if Isabel and Chiado can survive the harrowing descent into the heart of the Alfama, and if they can reach the press before the bank's digital blackout begins. Stay tuned for the next block. Subscribe to Novel Chronicles and hit the bell. The truth is about to fall like a hammer on the 7 hills. As they leaped toward the cable, the first gunshot of the night rang out, shattering a nearby street lamp. The audit of Lisbon had turned into a war for its very soul. The descent from the Miraduro was a blur of gravity and cold iron. Isabel's hands burned as she gripped the maintenance cable, the rough metal biting into her palms while the wind of the Alfama whipped through her hair. Below, the red-tiled roofs of the old district looked like a jagged sea of clay in the moonlight. Chiado followed, the satchel containing the truth swinging precariously against his side. The suspense was a physical pressure, the sound of the gunshot still echoing in her ears, a violent reminder that the financial topic of the Braganza diamonds was a secret the elite would kill to keep. They hit the wooden platform of the funicular service station with a jarring thud, the breath leaving their lungs in a synchronized gasp. "They won't expect us to go toward the river," Isabel whispered, her voice strained as she checked the satchel. The diamonds were still there, cold and unyielding, the exclusivity of their brilliance a stark contrast to the grime of their escape. The urgency of their mission had now reached a critical threshold. The bank's legal officer had made it clear. The denied fortune was not just a family matter. It was the structural integrity of the national credit. If the world learned that the Banco do Tejo was built on stolen 18th century collateral, the resolution would be a catastrophic run on the banks. Isabel wasn't just fighting for her name. She was holding the detonator to a financial bomb. They moved through the shadows of the Largo du Chafariz de Dentro, passing the Father Museum where the soulful, mournful songs of the city seemed to leak through the stone walls. It was a fitting soundtrack for a denied fortune. The connection between the longing of Fadu and the centuries of silence imposed on Isabel's family was a bridge made of tears and limestone. They reached a small, nondescript doorway near the docks, an old salt warehouse that Tiago's contact had mentioned. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of the sea and old wood, a sanctuary, however temporary, from the antagonists patrolling the hills above. If you are following this pulse-pounding audit of Lisbon's darkest corners, you are witnessing the power of the truth against a century of institutional lies. Make sure you are part of the Novel Chronicles family by subscribing and hitting the bell icon. We are halfway through this 80,000 character epic, and the final revelation of the 1755 legacy is closer than ever. Your support ensures that stories like Isabel's aren't silenced by the keepers of the foundation. Subscribe now to see how the 7 Hills finally speak. Inside the warehouse, Chiado pulled out a portable scanner. If we can transmit the high-resolution images of the stones and the signature on the 1755 ledger to the European Central Bank's Audit Division, they won't be able to suppress the financial topic anymore, he said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The surprise was the ledger itself. As Isabel turned the vellum pages, she saw more than just numbers. She saw the exclusivity of the betrayal, a list of names that included the most prominent families of the modern era, all of whom had signed off on the sequestration of the crown's diamonds during the Reconstruction. The suspense heightened as the blue progress bar on Tiago's screen began its slow crawl. 10%, 15%. The warehouse was quiet, but the silence was deceptive. Outside, the rhythmic lapping of the Tagus River against the pier sounded like footsteps. The joy of having the proof was tempered by the realization that they were trapped. The urgently was no longer about the merger, but about survival. Isabel looked at the raw diamonds, those sharp shards of the denied fortune. They were the Braganza of fire, stones that had seen the death of an empire and the birth of a republic. The connection to the 1940s, Isabel murmured, pointing to a later entry in the ledger, written in a different, more hurried hand. Look here, Chiado. During the war, the bank used the diamonds again. They weren't just rebuilding Lisbon. They were laundering Nazi gold through the exclusivity of the diamond legacy. The diamonds were the clean assets they used to mask the dirty money flowing through the neutral port. This was a new level of the truth. The diamonds hadn't just built the Baixa. They had financed the darkest chapter of the 20th century. Suddenly, the heavy iron door of the warehouse groaned. It wasn't the police. It was a group of men in civilian clothes, but their stance was unmistakable military precision. The keepers of the foundation had found them. The resolution was no longer a legal battle. It was a siege. Isabel grabbed a flare from a nearby emergency kit. Chiado, how much longer? She hissed. 3 minutes. I need 3 more minutes for the full encryption, he yelled, the blue light of the screen reflecting the terror in his eyes. The suspense reached a fever pitch as the men began to batter the door. The financial topic of the Braganza diamonds was about to be settled in a warehouse of salt and shadow. Isabel stood in front of the laptop, the iron key from a vault gripped in her hand like a weapon. The connection between the earthquake of 1755 and this moment was a single thread of defiance. They can't have it, she whispered. Even if the city falls, they can't have the lie anymore. The door gave way with a violent crash. The men entered with silenced weapons, their faces masked. But Isabel didn't run. She struck the flare, the brilliant, blinding crimson light, filling the room and reflecting off the diamonds in the open satchel. For a second, the denied fortune blinded everyone, a centuries-old fire erupting into the modern world. In that second, the truth was the only thing visible. Upload complete. Chiado screamed as he slammed the laptop shut and dove behind a stack of salt bags. The resolution was in the air, a digital ghost traveling to the clouds toward the heart of Europe. The urgently had been met, but the physical danger was just beginning. The lead man stepped toward Isabel, the flare dying in her hand. The data is gone, she told him, her voice cold and steady. The exclusivity of your secret is dead. What are you going to do now? To see the aftermath of the digital leak and to find out if Isabel and Chiado can escape the warehouse before the keepers of the foundation take their final revenge, stay tuned for the next block. Subscribe to Novel Chronicles and leave a comment. Can a nation truly survive its own history being revealed? The audit of Lisbon is entering its final, most explosive phase. Isabel looked at the diamonds one last time. They were just stones now. The real power was already in the wind. The lead operative paused, his silhouette framed by the jagged hole where the warehouse door once stood. The truth she had just broadcast was now a digital wildfire, jumping from server to server across the continent. For the first time, the exclusivity of the Banco, Duteju's power felt fragile. The financial topic was no longer a controlled narrative. It was an international incident, but the operative didn't retreat. He stepped over the spilled bags of salt, the white crystals crunching under his boots like the bones of the disinherited. The data is in the wind, the man replied, his voice a gravelly whisper. But you're still here, Isabel, and the diamonds are still here. The resolution isn't finished until the physical evidence is secured. He raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the warehouse floor began to vibrate. It wasn't an earthquake, but the heavy, rhythmic thrum of maritime engines. A searchlight from the Tagus River swept through the warehouse windows, blinding the operatives and illuminating the surprise that Isabel had arranged as her backup. Captain Vasco, a retired naval officer and a cousin of Isabel's family who had remained loyal to the denied fortune, pulled his patrol boat alongside the warehouse pier. Isabel, move! He bellowed over the roar of the engines. The connection between the sea and Lisbon's survival was being reenacted once again. The Tagus had always been the city's escape route. and tonight it would serve as the bridge to the resolution. Isabel and Chiado didn't hesitate. They scrambled toward the pier, the satchel of diamonds swinging between them. If you're following this high-stakes escape and want to know if the Brigands of Fire will finally reach the hands of the international courts, you are in the right place. Subscribe to Novel Chronicles and hit the bell icon. We are pushing through the final 40,000 characters of this Lisbon audit. Your support is the only thing that keeps the exclusivity of these secrets from being buried under tide. Comment below, would you trust the sea to protect the treasure? The operatives opened fire as Isabel jumped onto the deck of the boat. Bullets chewed into the wooden pilings and the metal hull, but Vasco hammered the throttle. The urgency of their departure was punctuated by the spray of the river as the boat surged toward the middle of the channel. Behind them, the warehouse and the black sedans of the keepers of the Foundation grew smaller, but the danger was only shifting. On the horizon, two faster, sleek interceptor craft appeared, their blue and red lights reflecting off the dark water. The bank had its own private maritime security, a fleet funded by the very financial topic Isabel was trying to expose. They have the radar lock, Chiado shouted, clutching the laptop as if it were a shield. They're going to disable our engines before we reach international waters. The suspense was a cold spray against their faces. Isabel looked at the diamonds in the satchel. The truth was that these stones were the only thing keeping the boat afloat, not because of their value, but because they were the target. If she could convince the interceptors that the stones were gone, the chase might end. The connection between the 1755 Royal Armada and this modern naval chase was a line of desperate strategy. Isabel reached into the satchel and pulled out a handful of the raw diamonds. In the moonlight, they looked like shards of broken glass. Vasco, head for the Bugio lighthouse, she commanded. The sandbars near the mouth of the river are shifting. If we can lead them into the shallows, their deeper hulls will bottom out. It was a classic surprise maneuver, a tactic used by Portuguese smugglers for centuries to evade the heavy colonial cutters. The financial topic of the chase was now a calculation of depth and speed. The interceptors were closing in, the distance dropping to 50 meters. Isabel stood at the stern, the satchel open. She took a handful of the smaller, decoy stones. Quartz crystals her grandfather had kept in a ledger for just such an occasion, and threw them into the wake of the boat. In the glare of pursuit lights, the crystals sparkled brilliantly, creating the exclusivity of a treasure being discarded. The lead interceptor swerved, its pilot instinctively slowing to mark the spot where the denied fortune had seemingly been dumped. It worked! Chiado gasped as the first interceptor fell back. But the second boat didn't take the bait. It surged forward, its bow wave a wall of white foam. The Resolution was still miles away. Isabel looked at the Brigands of Fire still in her bag. The truth was that the real stones were too precious to lose, but the urgency of their survival demanded a sacrifice. She looked at the Bugio lighthouse, its beams sweeping across the water like the eye of a giant. Vasco now cut the lights. The boat plunged into total darkness as they entered the treacherous Garganta do Tejo, the throat of the river where the currents are most violent. The connection between the geography of Lisbon and the destiny of its people was once again the deciding factor. The interceptor, blinded by its own searchlights and moving too fast to adjust, hit the submerged sandbar with a bone-jarring crunch. The sound of tearing fiberglass echoed over the water, a violent resolution to the chase. The joy that surged through Isabel was short-lived. They had cleared the river, but the financial topic was now a global one. The data upload had reached the European regulators, and as the sun began to rise over the Atlantic, the news feeds were already beginning to scream. The exclusivity of the Banco do Tejo was being dismantled in the digital world. But Isabel still had the physical proof. She looked at the diamonds, their raw edges catching the first light of dawn. To see the final confrontation at the International Court and to find out how the denied fortune of 1755 finally reshapes the future of Portugal. Stay tuned for the next block. Subscribe to Novel Chronicles and leave a comment. Can a country truly be rebuilt on the truth? The audit of the Seven Hills is reaching its shattering climax. Isabel closed the satchel. "Take us to The Hague, Vasco," she said quietly. The foundation is finally breaking. The open sea offered a temporary reprieve, but the financial topic was far from settled. As a patrol boat cleared the coastal waters, the digital impact of Tiago's upload began to manifest in real time. On the small satellite screen, they watched the truth ripple through the global markets. The Banco do Tejo stock was in a freefall, losing 40% of its value in less than an hour as regulators in Brussels froze the merger. The exclusivity of the Lisbon elite was being dismantled by a girl with a satchel and a laptop. However, the urgency of the situation shifted again. Enrique Tejo wasn't just a banker. He was a man with connections to the shadow cabinet of the European financial underworld. Isabel looked at the diamonds, her reflection caught in the jagged facets of particularly large raw stone. These were the foundation stones, the silent witnesses to the 1755 catastrophe. The connection between the suffering of the earthquake survivors and the opulence of the modern bank was a bridge of stolen time. She realized that the denied fortune wasn't just about the diamonds themselves. It was about the interest, the centuries of growth built on a vacuum. If she handed these over to a single government, the truth might be buried again in a different vault. She needed a more public resolution. If you are following this high-stakes maritime pursuit and want to know how the Braganza diamonds will be used to trigger the largest financial audit in European history, you are in the right place. Subscribe to Novel Chronicles and hit the bell icon. We are entering the final 30,000 characters of this Lisbon saga. Your support is a shield that protects Isabel as she navigates these shark-infested waters. Comment below who should receive the diamonds, the state or the people. Vasco, we aren't going to Hague yet, Isabel said, her voice steady despite the pitch and roll of the boat. They'll be waiting for us there. The keepers of the foundation have lawyers in every corridor of the International Court. She looked at the blueprint Tiago had salvaged. We're going to the Azores. There's an old telegraph station on the island for y'all, a relic of the early 20th century. It's part of the exclusivity of the submarine cable network. If we can broadcast the raw spectral data of these diamonds from a neutral, isolated hub, they can't claim the digital file was faked. The financial topic was now a war of verification. The surprise was that the old telegraph station was still owned by a trust in Isabel's grandmother's name, a tiny piece of the denied fortune that had slipped through the bank's fingers. It was the only place on Earth where she could prove the physical existence of the Braganza fire without being intercepted by the bank's private security. The connection between the old world cables and the modern cloud was her only resolution. The suspense tightened as a shadow appeared on the horizon. It wasn't intercepted this time. It was a long-range surveillance drone, a silent bird of prey sent by the shadow cabinet. The exclusivity of their escape was over. The drone didn't attack. It simply hovered, a persistent reminder that the urgency of their location was being broadcast to every mercenary vessel in the Atlantic. Isabel knew they had less than 12 hours before the heavy hitters arrived. Tiago, prepare the spectral analyzer, Isabel commanded. We need to map to the truth of every stone in this bag. When we hit the Azores, we won't have time for a second take. The connection between the 18th century stones and the 21st century sensors was a collision of eras. As the boat cut through the Atlantic swells, they worked in a cramped cabin, the light of the diamonds filling the space with a cold, haunting brilliance. The denied fortune was finally speaking. Each stone, when scanned, revealed a financial topic of its own, microscopic inclusions that acted like a fingerprint. These stones had been in the royal treasury. They had been handled by the Marquis of Pombal. They had been used to bribe generals and build palaces. The truth was an unbroken chain of corruption. The exclusivity of the Banco do Tejo's defense was crumbling with every data point they recorded. The joy that Isabel felt was tempered by the sight of a second drone joining the first. The antagonists were multiplying. The suspense was a physical weight on the deck of the boat. Vasco, can we go faster? She asked. I'm redlining the engines, Isabel, he replied, his jaw set. The sea is getting rougher. The Garganta do Tejo was a playground compared to what's coming. We're heading straight into a North Atlantic gale. The resolution of the 1755 legacy was now a battle against nature itself. The connection between the great earthquake and the rising storm was a poetic, terrifying symmetry. Isabel gripped the satchel. She had spent 30 years being a denied heiress, a woman without a past. Now, she was a woman holding the future of a city in her hands. The exclusivity of her destiny was finally clear. To see if Isabel can survive the Atlantic gale and reach the Azores before the Shadow Cabinet closes a net, stay tuned for the next block of this 80,000 character audit. Subscribe to Novel Chronicles and hit the bell. The truth is about to be broadcast to the world from the edge of the map. As the first wave of the storm crashed over the bow, Isabel looked at the diamonds. They were born in the earth, hidden in the stone and chased by the river, she whispered. Let's see how they handle the storm. The North Atlantic was a churn of slate-gray water and violent white foam, a chaotic resolution that seemed to mirror the crumbling of the Lisbon financial elite. The patrol boat, small and defiant, climbed the walls of the swells only to plunge into troughs with bone-jarring force. Inside the cabin, Isabel braced herself against the bulkhead, her fingers white-knuckled as she gripped the satchel. The financial topic of the Braganza diamonds was no longer an abstract debate in a boardroom. It was a physical battle for survival. The truth was that if they went down in this storm, the evidence of a 300-year-old crime would be reclaimed by the ocean, exactly as the history books had falsely claimed in 1755. The suspense was a rhythmic pounding against the hull, a reminder that the urgency of their mission was being challenged by the very elements. On the satellite monitor, the two drones were gone, unable to maintain their flight in the gale-force winds. This provided a small spark of joy, but it was overshadowed by the radar signature Vasco had just spotted. A heavy-duty salvage tug, a vessel built to withstand the worst of the Atlantic, was closing in from the north. It wasn't there for a rescue. It was the Shadow Cabinet's answer to the storm, a floating fortress designed to seize a denied fortune before it could reach the shores of Fayal. If you are holding your breath as Isabel faces the dual fury of the Atlantic and the mercenaries of the Lisbon elite, you are part of the Novel Chronicles journey. We are deep into the final 20,000 characters of this 80,000 character Lisbon audit. Subscribe now and hit the bell icon to ensure you are there for the moment that the truth finally reaches the telegraph cables. Your support is the lighthouse that guides us through these stories. Comment below. Can a secret as big as the Braganza diamonds ever truly stay buried? They're trying to ram us. Vasco yelled over the howling wind. They don't want the stones. They just want the exclusivity of our silence. The connection between the predatory tactics of the 18th century noblemen and this modern industrial assault was clear. The antagonists were willing to sacrifice the diamonds to the sea if it meant that the truth would never be verified. The financial topic of the Banco do Tejo was a house of cards, and Isabel was the wind that threatened to blow it down. Isabel looked at Chiado, who was desperately trying to keep the spectral analyzer from sliding off the table. Chiado, the satellite uplink, is it still active? She asked. Intermittent, he shouted back. The storm is interfering with the signal, but if we can get close enough to the Fayal station, I can tap into the underwater fiber optic trunk. This was the surprise they needed. The Fayal station wasn't just a museum. It was a landing point for the transatlantic cables that carried the exclusivity of the world's data. The resolution of the chase was now a race to the shore. The salvage tug was looming out of the mist, a dark iron mountain. The connection between the Gaiola Pombalina, earthquake-proof structures, and the resilience of their little boat was being tested to the limit. Vasco executed a daring, urgently maneuver, turning the boat into the wind and sliding down the back of a massive wave to narrowly avoid the tug's reinforced bow. The roar of the engines was deafening, a mechanical father of survival. The denied fortune pulsed in the satchel, the raw diamonds clashing against each other like the teeth of a hidden beast. The exclusivity of the Braganza fire was about to become a global property. Isabel reached into the bag and pulled out the 1755 ledger. She wrapped it in waterproof casing, tying it to her own body. If the boat goes, the truth goes with me, she vowed. The suspense reached a fever pitch as the lights of Horta, the main port of Fayal, appeared through the rain, a flickering promise of safety. But the tug wasn't giving up. It launched a fast-response RIB, rigid inflatable boat, into the churning water. The mercenaries were moving in for a boarding action. The financial topic, was now a hand-to-hand struggle. The connection between the boarding parties of the 18th century pirates and these high-tech enforcers was a terrifying surprise. Isabel stood on the deck, the salt spray blinding her as the first mercenary attempted to hook their gunwale. Not today. Vasco roared, swinging a heavy mooring line like a whip. The struggle was a blur of shadows and steel. The joy of seeing the harbor was replaced by the urgency of the fight. Isabel used a flare gun, not as a signal, but as a deterrent. The brilliant crimson light reflecting off the white foam and the panicked eyes of the boarders. The Resolution was messy, violent, and desperate. They cleared the harbor breakwater. The water suddenly and miraculously calm. The tug had to stop. The harbor was too shallow for its draft. The exclusivity of the local geography had saved them once again. Isabel and Chiado didn't wait for the boat to dock. They jumped onto the stone pier, the satchel of diamonds and the laptop clutched in their arms. The truth was only a few hundred meters away, inside the white walls of the old telegraph station. To see if Isabel can reach the cable terminal before the shadow cabinet triggers a digital blackout of the Azores. Stay tuned for the next block. Subscribe to Novel Chronicles and leave a comment. What is the true price of justice in a world of digital lies? The 1755 audit is entering its final, decisive hour. Isabel ran toward the station, her feet echoing on the wet pavement. "The foundation is cracking, Chiado," she whispered. "Now we let it fall." The old telegraph station on the island of Fayal stood as a whitewashed monolith against the dark, volcanic soil of the Azores, its antennas reaching into the storm like the fingers of a drowning man. For over a century, this station had been the exclusivity of the Atlantic, the point where the voices of the old world were translated into the pulses of a new. Isabel and Chiado burst through the heavy oak doors, their clothes soaked with salt and the urgency of their mission etched into their faces. The air inside was cool and smelled of ozone and ancient paper, a stark contrast to the violent financial topic raging outside the harbor walls. The truth was now a physical struggle against the clock. Chiado rushed to the central terminal, his hands trembling as he bypassed the station's public interface to reach the raw fiber-optic trunk. The connection between the primitive 19th century copper wires and the near-instantaneous light of modern fiber was the resolution Isabel had been banking on. If they could broadcast the spectral exclusivity of the diamonds from here, the bank's digital walls wouldn't just crumble, they would evaporate. The financial topic of the Braganza fire was about to go from a local secret to a global reality. If you are witnessing the final, shattering moments of this 80,000 character audit and want to see the denied fortune finally set the record straight, you are in the right place. Subscribe to Novel Chronicles and hit the bell icon. We are in the final 2 blocks of the Lisbon saga. Your support has been the anchor for Isabel's journey. Comment below. Should the diamonds be returned to the royal family or distributed to the people of Portugal? They're trying to block the Fayal node. Chiado yelled, his eyes fixed on a cascade of red warning lights on the monitor. The shadow cabinet had moved with terrifying speed, using their influence with the mainland telecommunications providers to isolate the island. The exclusivity of the bank's power was a digital noose, tightening around the station. "Isabel, I need the spectral key. Now!" Isabel opened the satchel, the raw diamond spilling onto the metal table with sound like falling ice. She grabbed the largest stone, the foundation stone, and placed it into the analyzer's chamber. The connection between the deep earth of Brazil and the high-tech sensors of the Azores was a bridge of light. The truth began to appear on the screen, a unique, impossible-to-replicate molecular signature that dated back to the 18th century. It was the physical proof that these stones were the missing Braganza legacy. The suspense reached a peak as the sound of a helicopter began to drown out the wind. The bank's private security wasn't waiting for the storm to clear. They had flown in a rapid response team from a nearby freighter. The antagonists were literally descending from the sky. The urgency of the upload was now a matter of seconds. 10%, 25%, 40%. The blue bar was a lifeline, slowly stretching toward the resolution of a 300-year-old lie. "They're on the roof," Isabel shouted, the first sound of heavy boots echoing above them. She looked at the iron key in her hand, the same key that had opened the flooded Roman galleries in Lisbon. She realized the surprise was that the key wasn't just for a vault. She looked at the station's main power cabinet and saw a vintage, heavy-duty manual override switch, an 18th century design updated for the 20th century. It required an old-style skeleton key to lock the signal into a high-priority emergency broadcast. The financial topic was now a physical act of defiance. Isabel jammed the key into the override and turned it with all her strength. The resolution was a massive surge of power that sent a spark across the room, locking the Fial node into a sovereign emergency state. This was the exclusivity of the old infrastructure, a backdoor designed for wartime that the modern bank had forgotten to decommission. The upload speed tripled. 70%, 85%, 100%. The joy that surged through Isabel was a tidal wave of relief. It's out, Chiado. It's gone. The truth was now in the hands of every major news outlet and regulatory agency on the planet. The denied fortune was no longer a secret. It was a revolution. But the doors of the station were being kicked in. The urgency of their survival was at its most critical point. The lead mercenary entered, his weapon raised, but he froze as he looked at the monitors. The truth was broadcast in a million directions, a digital ghost that no bullet could stop. "You're too late," Isabel said, her voice steady and filled with a cold, hard clarity. "The financial topic of your bank is over. The foundations of Lisbon are officially being audited by the world." The connection between the 1755 earthquake survivors and this moment of justice was a circle that had finally closed. The exclusivity of the elite had been broken by the very stones they had stolen. To see the final fallout for the Banco do Tejo and the ultimate fate of the Braganza diamonds in the final block, stay tuned. Subscribe to Novel Chronicles and leave a comment. What would you do with a fortune that was stolen from your ancestors? Isabel looked out the window at the breaking dawn. The storm was fading, and for the first time in 3 centuries, the truth was finally breathing in the morning air. The mercenary stood paralyzed in the blue glow of the monitors as the final data packets vanished into the global network. The truth was no longer a secret guarded by stone and shadow. It was a digital entity, replicated across 1,000 servers in 12 jurisdictions. Enrique Tejo's exclusivity had been his undoing. By centralizing the financial topic of the Braganza diamonds into a single secret collateral, he had created a single point of failure that Isabel had just exploited. The lead operative lowered his weapon. The urgency of his contract evaporated by the sheer finality of the upload. There was no fortune left to protect, only a crime to be investigated. The resolution of the 1755 legacy began to unfold within minutes. Across the Atlantic, the board of the Banco do Tejo was being dismantled by emergency regulatory squads. The denied fortune was no longer a hidden asset. It was the evidence that would trigger a total restructuring of the Portuguese financial foundation. The connection between the shadow cabinet's greed and the modern housing crisis was laid bare in the spectral data Isabel had broadcast. The diamonds, the literal and figurative foundation stones, had finally served their true purpose. They had illuminated the dark corners of the nation's history. If you have followed Isabel's journey from the flooded vaults of Lisbon to the storm-swept shores of Fial, you have witnessed the power of a single voice against a century of institutional silence. This concludes our 80,000 character audit of the denied fortune. We are grateful for every like, comment, and subscription that allows us to bring these The Truth Chronicles to life. Subscribe to Novel Chronicles and hit the bell icon to be the first to join us for our next journey into the hidden ledgers of the world. What secret should we audit next? Leave your suggestion in the comments. Isabel walked out of the telegraph station into the crisp, post-storm air of the Azores. The joy she felt was not the excitement of wealth, but the heavy, peaceful satisfaction of a debt finally settled. The exclusivity of her family's suffering was over. She looked at the satchel, which still contained the physical Braganza diamonds. They were no longer the financial topic of a bank. They were the heritage topic of a people. She knew what had to be done. Under the supervision of the international observers already arriving at the Horta airport, she would return the stones to the Museum of Ancient Art in Lisbon. not as royal jewelry, but as a foundation fund for the reconstruction of the city's social fabric. The resolution was complete. The Banco do Tejo was nationalized. Its executives faced decades of urgently needed trials, and the 1755 ledger was placed in the National Archives for all to see. The connection between the disaster of the past and the justice of the present was a bridge that Isabel had built with her own courage. She stood on the pier as Captain Vasco's boat bobbed in the gentle harbor swell. The denied fortune was gone, but the city was finally standing on a foundation of truth. The truth about Lisbon was that its beauty didn't come from the gold or the stones, but from the resilience of those who rebuilt it. Isabel looked back at the Seven Hills one last time from across the water. The exclusivity of the lie was dead. The audit was finished.